Howdy, howdy. We are now going into page 2 of the as-is residential contract for purchase. We're going to start with, the closing date. Section 4, paragraph 4. The closing date shall occur on, if you're using dot loop, you'll click this handy little button. All right, so let's talk about picking a closing date. Typically, we like to do 30 days. So the 23rd, you look at the 23rd, that's 30 days out. Now, try to give a little bit more time. My suggestion is round it to the following Thursday after 30 days. Why do we want to suggest Thursday instead of Friday? Glad you asked. If you do it on Thursday and there's a delay, your closing gets moved to Friday. But if you try to close originally on Friday and there's a delay, now the closing happens on Monday, meaning your buyers are mad, your sellers are mad, everybody's unhappy, and they're going to blame you, the agent, because you should have foreseen this happening. Okay, so make it Thursday, make it a habit, make it a practice. Personally, I think 30 days is way too stressful to try to close these days. I like to try to do like 40 days. Extension of the closing date. Hey, if you need to extend the closing date for any reason, you want to type up a separate addendum. We will cover that later, but get that addendum to say buyer and seller agree to extend the closing date to, and then put the date. Get that signed by the buyer and seller. Paragraph 6, occupancy and possession. Check if subject to leases or occupancy after closing. So sometimes, the seller is going to close, but they may be staying there another week or another month. We call that a lease back. If you're doing a lease back, check this box, and then very, very important, you better, and I mean better, put together an official Florida Realtor legal lease. Cover your buyers' butts by getting a lease. Paragraph 7, assignability. Check 1. The buyer may assign the contract and thereby be released from any liability. Check 2, may assign but not be released from liability. Or check 3, may not assign this contract. Now, the way I explain this to buyers, we're going to click may not assign the contract because of if your buyer is intending to move into the property, they're going to buy it, they're going to close it. Now, what assignability essentially means is it's like a wholesaler. So I am person A, I'm buyer A, and I go under contract with seller 1. But I've got buyer B in the wings who's going to purchase the property. So buyer A, me, gets this property under contract with seller 1, and then I would assign the contract to buyer B. Paragraph 8, financing, right? This is a cash transaction. Cool, click it. If not, click that it's contingent upon. If blank within 30 days, well, that's typical. Buyers getting a conventional loan. Are they getting an FHA? Are they getting a VA? Are they doing another type of loan? Fun fact, if you're doing an FHA or a VA loan, there is an additional addendum for you to sign. Check 1, is it a fixed rate? Is it an adjustable rate? Typically it's a fixed rate. This is where it gets kind of fun. This is where you're going to show off your knowledge. Okay, so the buyer shall make application for financing within, if left blank, 5 days. Now that's very typical. What that's saying is that your buyer is actually applying for a loan within 5 days of an executed contract. But it doesn't really matter because you're not taking out a buyer unless they're already pre-approved, working with a lender. And once you get this contract executed, what does executed mean? Executed means both the buyer and seller have signed the contract. A fully executed contract also is the same thing as an effective contract. Bonus tip, it is not effective until every single signature and initial has been signed. I have seen in the past deals fall apart at the last minute because maybe a buyer wants to back out of the contract and they purposely didn't sign or initial one line. Now the contract becomes voidable. It's a mess. So make sure it's fully executed. Boom, boom, boom. All right, let's go ahead and move into the next page here. Closing costs, fees, and charges, paragraph 9. This explains and breaks down what the closing costs are going to be for that are paid by the seller, that are paid for by the buyer. Title and evidence and insurance, this is going to be looked at as well. Why this is important to review, a lot of times buyers aren't quite sure what their closing costs are going to be and sellers aren't quite sure. So this can kind of become a sticking point from time to time, but it is very important when you're explaining the offer to your buyer that they are responsible for their portion of closing costs. And that wraps up this period of instruction on the Florida FAR Bar as is contract for purchase and sale.